Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Capital One Bank, New York Community Bank, Eastern Consolidated, M&T Bank, Sterling National Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Customers Bank, Ariel Property Advisors, Dime Community Bank. Additional funding is made possible by grants from AM Trust Title, AVR Realty Company, Avison Young, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chase Commercial Mortgage, Citizens Bank, CPEX Real Estate Services, Colliers International NYC, Cohen Equities, Collins Building Services, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handler Real Estate Organization, Handro Properties, Hodges Ward Elliott Inc., Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Bank, New Banks, Newmark Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Meringoff Family Foundation, the Moynihan Organization, Moynihan Capital Partners, and these friends.
A farmer? Norwich, Connecticut? Nah, you know, then the Bronx, at least the Bronx. Then Brooklyn, okay? Korean War? Purple Heart? Advertising sales? Nah, I'm gonna open up a club. I wanna be a manager. I wanna be a producer. I wanna be an actor. A club? In a Vietnamese restaurant? Nah, we'll call it the Improv. I don't know why. It'll be for singers. Nah, for singers. It'll be comedy. It'll be releasing the life of Jimmy Fallon, Jay Leno, David Steinberg, you know, everybody. The legendary Improv. Today I'm fortunate to have Tripp Whetsell, the co-author, and the legendary Bud Friedman, the leaders who just wrote The Improv, an oral history of the Comedy Club. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So tell me about where the family came from originally. They were farmers, you said to me. Connecticut farmers?
My father's side were
Farmers.
Thank you.
Yes.
And my mother's side was retail.
They were in the retail business.
Yeah.
And then your father and his brothers subsequently were in the automotive repair work?
No, the automotive
Parts.
They have the General Motors
Franchise.
They had the General Motors franchise. Okay.
for southern New England.
You see, but it would have been interesting if they had the Dodge brothers, because, you know, the Dodge brothers allegedly were Jewish. Okay, General Motors weren't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so, you know, they had the Dodge people even had a Jewish star on the initial engine block.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so, you know, so the brothers are in Norwalk. Norwich. They're selling parts. And then you said you were born in 1932.
Yeah.
And in 1936, from selling the parts, your father got an infection and passed away when you were 4 years of age.
5
years of age. Then Mom goes into the business of what?
My mother did everything. She said clothing from
Plus size woman.
yeah,
Plus
plus size woman. gave them a sense of humor, a sense of security, and so they finally moved to New York.
It was her two brothers who brought it to New York, right?
Yeah,
Who were in the garment business.
yeah.
So you grew up at that time in the Bronx, right?
Yeah.
So how was it growing up in the Bronx as a kid?
It was all right. I spent
Summers in Newark.
Thank you.
With your uncle.
In outside of Norwich, in Uncasville, Connecticut, from my uncle's place, my father's brother. They spent 4 summers there.
Yeah, and that helped you a lot because,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things that helped him with, you know, because a lot of his friends were doing drugs at the time.
Yeah.
And that kind of awakened his eyes to that, you know.
So how'd you decide that one day you wanted to be an actor? You liked Hedy Lamarr or something?
Well, you worked in the Catskills a couple of summers.
Oh yeah, but that was before. When I still lived in Norwich, my cousin, who was 4 years older than I, was decided to produce a show, and in a garage,
During the summer camp.
you know, he set up a duet for me.
So that was the initial situation. From the Bronx, you moved to Manhattan. You went to DeWitt Clinton.
DeWitt Clinton.
Right, because, you know, even though it was a schlep on the train, you went on the DeWitt Clinton. And then you graduated high school in what, 1950. At that time, you started at Brooklyn College.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I didn't start right away. I put a year off.
Right. And then the Korean War came up. And what happened in the Korean conflict?
They decided they couldn't without this.
You know, he was injured his first week there in the Korean War.
Now, the first week in Connecticut.
In Korea.
Korea.
Yeah.
Right, but before that, something that people don't know that you said to me when we got together the other day was when you were in basic training in California, you went AWOL with your buddies over there, and that was something that later on had a big effect on you that you wanted when you opened up the Improv in California.
Oh, yeah.
You liked California from that. That was
Yeah.
the initial situation. So as getting back to what Tripp was saying, you got injured at Pork Chop Hill.
Yes.
In the Korean War. After that, you came back to New York, and at that time, you went to Brooklyn College, and then you realized that you had the opportunity under the GI Bill to go to NYU.
Right.
So you graduated NYU, and you went up to Boston, right?
Yes.
Okay, and what were you doing in Boston?
I was
Account executive.
yeah,
At an advertising agency.
a small agency.
Yeah, Marvin and Leonard on Lincoln Street, and they specialized in shoe accounts primarily.
So afterwards, you come to New York, and this is when you want to be an actor or something.
They ruled that out early.
You ruled out the acting.
Yeah.
So you came to New York. So how do you get the idea to open up a club?
Well, I was dating a girl who was a singer in
Fiorello, right?
Fiorello, and we go out with a couple of girls, a couple of guys after the show, and they would say, "Remember so and so," and would get up to sing in Harry's Bar in.
Basically, I mean, they were, you know, well, all the Broadway shows, as they still do, did out of tryouts in places like Chicago or Philadelphia or Boston, and there were places for them to go out after the shows to hang out and, you know, let their hair down and
Right, but the kid didn't have much money.
No,
Okay.
It was nothing like that here.
And he was thinking of buying a pet store, I think. You were
Yes.
thinking of buying a pet store in Greenwich Village. And then finally you see this Vietnamese restaurant in Hell's Kitchen, which you said could work out as this type of club for the environment. So this is 1963. How do you come up with the name, the Improv?
Well, it was twofold. One is it was
Well, it was a couple of things. I mean, he did it the way he did it. You know, everything he didn't know what he was doing as he was just putting it together, and everything.
But it was
like,
cheap. It was $250
yeah.
a month.
And he did a lot of the work himself because he's very handy. And
But the big story was you didn't have enough money to buy sheetrock, so the wall, the famous Improv wall in '63, you kept it as it was, right?
yeah, brick wall.
So the initial Improv was for singers, right?
It was, yeah.
You were open from like 11:30 at night to 6 in the morning. You didn't even have a liquor license for a year. You didn't have enough money for a liquor
Right.
license. So what changed the Improv from singing to become the famous comedy club?
After about a year,
Dave Astor.
Dave Astor walked in, and he was a comics comic. He was probably somebody you didn't ever heard of, but he was quite good and quite well known, as he was playing the Blue Angel. He said, "Could I get up?" And I said, "Sure."
You had a great response from everyone there.
Oh yeah, but I had a great.
Feeling for it too.
Right.
You know, eventually it got to him that he finally decided he enjoyed listening to comedians improve upon jokes and nuances versus hearing someone sing the same song every night. And that was sort of the tipping point, but it didn't change to complete comedy until,
What year was that?
well, really, they continued using singers and comics until the early 80s. I mean, it didn't really stop being a place that just used comics until even after you moved to Los Angeles, which we'll get
Which
to.
we'll get to.
Yeah.
But when you were in New York, I mean, there were so many people who were the doormen at the Improv. I mean, you know.
Oh yeah, we had Danny Aiello, and Joe Piscopo, and I don't know, so many others.
And then you even had the situation that they had this guy who was up in Boston who schlepped to New York all the time by the name of Jay Leno. What's the story about Jay Leno?
Jay Leno was going to Emerson as college, and he worked part-time for a
Delivery service, right?
Car delivery.
A car.
Well, he prepped cars and he
Prepped
would
cars.
deliver them down here.
no, but he worked for Rolls Royce.
Yeah, there's a place called Foreign Motors on Comm Avenue up there.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
I never knew.
And he came into New York and he tried a couple of times to get an audition, right?
I finally got him on stage, and he was marvelous. He was fresh.
What's the story about Beth Midler? You were an agent, they said, right?
Yes, I just saw her two nights ago in
Hello, Dolly.
Hello Dolly, and she was marvelous. But
She didn't blow you away at first, though.
no, she.
It was
That's
going to
right.
do Dirges.
She said every song, not two songs, she just did it for, and she was terrible.
But she worked out well, you know.
Yes, yes,
You know,
yeah.
even though she was, from Zeidel in Fiddler on the Roof,
Yeah.
she did okay.
Yeah,
You always liked California.
yeah.
How did you decide to open up in California?
Well, I wanted to open up in California for the longest time, but I didn't.
You know, it was a couple of things. I mean, he wanted to open in California. There were real reasons to open in California because the comedy business was moving out there because Johnny Carson left in '72. And even though the New York club was continuing to do very well and break a lot of new talent out, including Andy Kaufman and guys like Larry David,
Robert Kahn.
Robert Klein, who started in the '60s, it was, the writing was on the wall that, the entertainment business was moving to the West Coast when Johnny moved out there in 1972. And he saw the handwriting on the wall that he needed to, have a presence out there. And of course, this was even before Saturday Night Live was
Right.
in the air.
So you move out to California. You're competing with the Comedy Club, okay?
The Comedy Store.
The Comedy Store. And during the period of time, New York still remained open, and you had this guy who got a good job with HBO later on, right?
Yeah, Chris Albrecht.
Chris Albrecht was
right,
my
who was
partner.
who was your partner, and he was running New York, and you're out in California, and business is doing well, and then one night there was a fire, right? And I think what happened in the book, you talk about the celebration of drinking so much champagne after the fire.
They went to a place the night after that called Mustache, or the night of the fire, Mustache, which was a little French place across the street. Yeah, a French restaurant. And he was just, trying to figure out what was going on. And this was, and the night that the fire happened, this was really the first time that he was able to relax. He was really starting to feel good about how the business was going, because there had just been a talent strike, a very famous talent strike against, Mitzi Shore, and not paying the comedians who owns the Comedy Store. And they had just resolved the strike, and a lot of the comedians were coming over to his club, not playing, because they were
you paid next to nothing. There's a story in the book that Jimmy Fallon still has a copy of the check for $8.38. Okay,
and they still don't pay that much today,
But it's the opportunity.
Yeah, it's the opportunity.
But how many people were?
But you got to understand that $8 a day would a set. They were how many spots? Do you think
and it would have wiped you out. And the other thing, Michael, is he didn't at the time that he wasn't doing this to be miserly or cheat anybody. At the time, he didn't. It started out as a showcase club. Nobody got paid at the beginning. It was a very good relationship for everybody, because comics got a chance to get some stage time, or singers or whatever, just work out some new material. Booking agents came in, and so this guy would be good. So it was a very fortuitous thing for everybody, and he didn't realize that.
So later on, how the cable show on A&E came out in the '80s, live from the Improv.
An evening at the Improv.
An evening at the Improv. Okay, you did 400 hours of that.
Yeah, people wanted to get into business with me, and I say, "Hey, kid, you could open up on television," and they disappear. They never get back. And finally, this guy came in and said, "You want to get on television?" I said, "Yes."
And you were the host.
Yes, I was the host.
The host with the most, incredible.
Yeah.
And then you also did some movies, right?
Yes, I made about four, 5 movies, and they were pretty good.
Right, as they would say, pretty good. And I think it was Judd Apatow who said that he got the inspiration of the 40-year-old virgin from working at the Improv. Okay,
he worked as a doorman, and he was there for about 1 or 2 years. And he was a nice kid. He's a nice kid. Yeah.
And Sarah Silverman said she spent a good amount of time at the Improv.
Yes,
okay?
she still does.
And then besides Sarah Silverman, then there was this guy, Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David.
Larry,
they used to come in this club, and he'd go on stage. First of all, and he'd get on stage and he'd look at the crowd. He said, "Nah," and he'd dive off
Not tonight.
stage. And that happened twice a year.
But there's something, I'm not sure if it was in the book or something else I read, that when the Seinfeld show came on, and when they did the segment on NBC about a show about nothing, it really came out of a sketch or something that happened on your show at the Improv, right?
Well, legend has it sort of both. I mean, they sort of sealed it. It was sort of, I want to give Rick Newman of Cancer Rising Star his due credit, because he was very helpful to this book too. They gestated it some there. the Green Kitchen, you know, the place where they would go after work to talk and things like that. And then they also kind of talked about it a lot over at the Improv as well, you know, in the diner that's right near the Improv. They're still open today. So yeah, it was sort of 50-50.
Now, when did you start deciding that you wanted to franchise, open up more improvs?
Well, it was 85, and one of the comics, he was very wealthy, came to me and said he'd like to franchise the club. And I said, in a in a stroke of genius, I said, okay. And Mark Anderson opened up 3-4 clubs, all in the,
The first was in San
California.
Francisco. I
Huh?
think the first was in San Francisco.
yes, I'm sorry.
And there's a great story in the book about their trip down there because they rented an Amtrak train, a Pullman car, and they had a big party. Bill Maher was on the train. B. Arthur from Maud and the Golden Girls was on the train.
And one of the guys stocking the station was a blind comic, and his partner took him to the train and said, "Would you mind? He's getting off at Anaheim," and not at all. He sat down, and when I came into Anaheim, we were going over to
The club, the new club. Yeah,
club in
San Francisco.
no. The first club was in Pacific Beach, which is south of me. So I said, just play with me. And he said, all right. And I said, okay, here we are in
Pacific Palisades.
In Pacific Building. How do you decide, the two of you, to write the book?
Well,
I mean, you know, it's right now, the initial Improv opened up in 1963.
yeah.
Okay, so, the Epic TV did a show on the Improv on the 50th anniversary, okay? Let's talk about the book.
Well, as you know, you've known me for a while. I can write about comedy. I'm an entertainment journalist, and I was lucky enough. I always wanted to be a comedian as a kid. I
Thank
grew up
God we
watching.
didn't.
Oh, thank God, you know.
I always got to hear that too. I grew up watching his show an evening at the Improv, and certainly knew about the Improv lineage. And then when I was covering the comedy beat first for the New York Post and then the Daily News, I was writing about the scene, and I always knew there was a rich story here. When Jimmy Fallon moved The Tonight Show back to New York in 2014, I wanted to do a story about how that was going to impact, having him back here, or The Tonight Show back here, rather, was going to impact the comedy business here versus the West Coast. And I interviewed Bud for the article just to get his take on it, and we had lunch when he was here for Jimmy Fallon's first taping, and we discussed the idea, and that's how that kind of evolved from there. So I always had wanted to do a book on it because I knew the richness of the story, and he agreed to do it. So, yeah.
I mean, it's a great story. Everything is, we say sometimes it was beshet, okay, and meant to be. And
No, he doesn't.
No, it was meant to be when you met him. That helped, okay, because it's a great book. It tells the whole history, tells the life of Bud. At one time, your wife said to you, "How could you want to be a real estate salesman?"
My wife's name is Alexandria.
We have a picture of Alexandria, and we also have some pictures of the kids and everybody
good.
else. So the opportunities and the comments by all the leading performers talking about the legendary Bud Friedman and the Improv, I'm happy that the two of you have put a great book together, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you.